Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
We were pumped to get the chance to talk to Diana Rodgers today. She's just put out her latest book, co-written with Robb Wolf, Sacred Cow, which dissects the nutritional, environmental, and ethical case for better meat. The documentary of the same name is set to be released imminently too. If you're a coach working in the nutrition space, at some point your clients will ask you for your opinion on plant-based or animal-based diets. You might already have your own personal viewpoint, and that's cool. But it's generally a good exercise to confront our biases and explore all sides of an argument so that we can arm our clients with truly well-rounded knowledge. Remember, our role as coaches is not to tell our clients what to do per se, but to coax out their own answers. We'd love to have you screenshot your podcast player and tag us on Instagram at Health Coach Radio. And don't forget to tag Diana too at Sustainable Dish. By the way, the show notes for this episode and all previous episodes of Health Coach Radio can always be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. Without further delay, let's drop into today's chat with author, documentarian, regenerative farmer, and registered dietitian Diana Rodgers.
All right, Diana Rodgers, how are you? We're so excited to talk to you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, we're just thrilled. And you know, look, I'm assuming a big chunk of the people that listen to this know who you are. But lo and behold, I'm sure there will be a few that don't. So we would love to hear. We'd like to start every interview with you giving your backstory, a little bit about who you are, your history, and how you got here. Mm-hmm. Would you mind?
Yeah, sure. So as a kid, I was really sick growing up. It wasn't until I was 26 that I found out I was an undiagnosed celiac for my whole life. And I went to a new doctor who just started asking a lot of questions about my digestion. And I was like, it's probably IBS, stress, because that's what you think when it's normalized in your life every day that you're doubled over in searing pain after you eat. Mm-hmm. And I was underweight and just always sick. And so I was like, how can I be intolerant to wheat when that's what I eat? Like, that's what people eat. It's like, right. Anyway, so I went gluten-free, and at the time I just, went to a dietitian here in Boston, who's one of the most, the head, gluten-free dietitians here. And she just handed me a bunch of coupons for like gluten-free frozen meals, right? Like Amy's gluten-free, burrito bowl and things like that. And my digestion did get better, but like osteoporosis went away at 26. I was like bone loss. But I was still having all these blood sugar issues. And I, kept asking my doctor like, hey, I think I'm diabetic, or there's something wrong. I had gluten-free granola bars in my bag. I had to eat like every hour and a half, or else I'd have like tunnel vision and sweating and like total panic attacks. And nobody would give me a reason. And so I was going about my life, and I had a career in marketing actually before I got into all of this, and worked at Whole Foods actually approving all the gluten-free stuff that they were having in the stores. And so I would try the latest gluten-free pizza that they would pitch to our region. And I'd take it home and I'd be like, oh yeah, this one's so much better than that other brand. We should totally carry this one, or whatever, brownies and, mac and cheese. And this is really when it was all first coming on the market. Like when I first went gluten-free, it was like, there was one kind of bread that you had to get from Canada or something, like with a prescription. And so it was exciting to me that, I got to try all these new foods and everything. And when I had our second child, which was 15 years ago now, it just didn't make sense for me to be working a corporate job while my husband at the time was a farmer and working crazy hours, and it was just insane. And so I took a step back and started working at the farm where he managed. And I was running a lot of the front of the house stuff. So our CSA program, our store, and we hosted a raw milk co-op, like a Weston A. Price group. And I was like, who are these crazy people coming in here for butter? And like, you're not supposed to eat that. And what is all this coconut oil people keep asking me to order? And why do they want lard? And like, I don't understand any of this. So I started reading a little bit about it. I went to a Weston A. Price conference. I started eating butter after I heard it like 17 times. Like I was still like, I don't think I should be eating butter. And it really was the beginning of me fixing my blood sugar problems. I had gestational diabetes. I mean, I'm really carb insensitive. And I think it's just because, of, a mix of bad genes and malabsorption from celiac, just constantly having to eat all the time. I think I was just burning out, my pancreas. And I'm still that way today. Like I really can't tolerate high carb diets. But anyway, so after I went to the Weston A. Price conference, I was like, I have to become a nutritionist. I have to, what do I need to do? And so programs like yours weren't available at the time. And so I actually went up to Sally Fallon and I'm like, what do I need to do? Like, I want to help everyone eat this way. It's really fixed me. And so she mentioned NTA, Nutritional Therapy Association, which is the program that I ended up doing. And it was a really great primer. I mean, before I went into that program, I would read a book on juice fasting and think, oh yeah, totally, that's it. And then I would read a book on, I did the Fat Flush Plan, which is kind of close actually to paleo, except for it's not high fat, but at least it's on the way a little bit. And that made a lot of sense to me. And then towards the end of the NTA program, I had to do a book report. I had to read a book that had a diet challenge in it and follow it. And so there was this book called The Paleo Solution that had just come out. Oh, yeah. And so I did it and I was like, so scared to like go basically keto. I don't like sweet potatoes. And so I basically was like, all right, I'm going to do that diet plus a little bit higher fat because I know fat is good, it does well for me. And I don't like sweet potatoes. So I'm just not going to really do carbs. So it was basically keto, the keto version of Robb's diet. And after feeling like I was on like 7 Benadryl a day for the first like 2 weeks, I woke up, I could make it from lunch to dinner without a snack. I could skip lunch and feel okay. I couldn't believe that I wasn't obsessing about what I was going to eat for dinners from, 6 a.m. in the morning. I mean, it was really insane just how dramatic. It was even more dramatic than going gluten-free for a celiac for me. And I was like, this is it. And then I quickly found Mark's work right afterwards and was like, okay. Cause he was a little higher fat at the time than the Paleo Solution. And I met them both at the Ancestral Health Symposium in LA at UCLA, which was the first one. Like it was the first, that's where I met Michelle Tam, who's now one of my best friends. Awesome. And Diane Sanfilippo, like everybody. And then I opened a practice and I quickly realized just for me that becoming a dietitian was actually the next step in my career path because I wanted to be able to take health insurance and really do more work with people with GI issues and medical issues like celiac and Crohn's and colitis and stuff like that. So I then did that, which took me about 7 years, part-time working, raising kids and going to college and having to redo. I mean, I was an art major undergrad. So this was like biochem. Are you kidding me? So I did all of that and did my internship. And I have a whole story about just the craziness. I got denied an internship because they found my books on paleo and had a crazy experience working in an acute long-term care hospital where people were dying on me. And there was really just nothing I could do. There was like, I had some boost shakes and feeding tubes and like, that's all I could do. And these people were dying. And it was so hard to work in a hospital as a dietitian. And I knew I didn't want to do that, but it was a good experience to see what that was like, and to see a population that probably wouldn't just elect to come see you for, longevity and out of pocket, it's just a different type of person, right? That's dealing with all of this. And so I'm glad that I had that opportunity. And so today I have a clinical practice. I started realizing, I'm going off on a really long monologue.
No, I love it.
I'm sorry. I started realizing that, there's a lot of people talking about nutrition, but is there anything I can say that's different? And people were really responding to farm images and information that I was putting up with my background knowledge on, sustainable farming and all of that. And I realized this is really interesting, because most of the people that are talking about sustainability and diet are talking about vegetarian and vegan diets.
Yes.
And actually, I have the complete opposite message, and nobody is saying this out loud. And so I had become friends with Robb Wolf, just through, we have a very similar background where we were both sick and came into this. Chris Kresser has a similar background too. But Robb has always been really, really interested in the sustainability story in particular. And so he and I started doing some presentations and at conferences and fundraisers for the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund, and events at different farms. And I started bugging him to write a book about sustainability. And I think at first I was calling it like eco paleo. And years and years and years of me pestering him that we have to write a book together. This would be so great. And he kept saying, I don't think the timing's right. Like, I don't think people are ready to hear this. And it was really interesting. Our talks went from like me and Robb and like 3 people in the audience to, last year, full house, full crowded room, standing room only. People are really interested in this. And I think once you fix your own health, there's so many, ways that you can help people, right? You can become a health coach. You can change your career and develop a food brand. And, so for Robb and I, it was really like, what can we do with all this background knowledge that we have to really like impact change? And it was like, let's just save the world. So we decided to save the world. And the book took a really long time to write, because just how to structure it, how to organize it, which argument do we start with first? Most people go vegetarian or vegan for ethical reasons. And so, do you start with the ethical argument? Well, you really have to understand the nutritional importance of animal-based foods and the ecological impact animals have in a regenerative food system before you can even start talking about ethics. And so we decided to start with nutrition, because we felt that why even argue about whether or not a food is sustainable if it's not a healthy food for humans, right? So, that's the number one argument that's being pushed out there, is like, people are saying, well, this is currently the most sustainable food, so we need to eat it.
Right.
Like grains are more sustainable than factory farming, so we should eat grains.
Right.
And so we're flipping it on its head and saying, okay, what's the ideal human diet? And which is, based on a hunter-gatherer type template, not exclusively, but that's the zip code that we're staying within. And then how can this be produced in a more sustainable way, that when we come back 1,000 years from now, there's still humans here on Earth, and there's still a food system, and we haven't destroyed our soil and everything. And then all of these things need to be taken into account when we talk about ethics. So not is it, bad to kill animals, but, is it bad to be pushing an unhealthy diet full of ultra processed foods on malnourished and underprivileged children? Is that an ethical thing? Is it ethical to say that, we don't really care about how farm workers are treated? All we care about is how animals are treated. So we really bring up all of these issues in the ethics section. So it's not just, is killing an animal wrong, but, what food system actually increases biodiversity? It feeds us the healthiest diet possible, and it actually contributes to the betterment of all of us and the planet. And turns out that it's a a paleo type regenerative food system. And that's the conclusion we come to. And so we just published the book, and the film is on its way. It's finished, and we're going to be releasing it on my website this fall, so people can go to sacredcow.info and sign up for my newsletter to find out when, how to sign up for the film when it comes out. And I'm happy it's done, because it was just years and years of a lot of work and stress to raise money to make a film, and to, you know, try to figure out how to write this book that's never even been attempted before. And so that's where I'm at. And you know, just got back from my clinic where I was helping people, you know, with their diet and going keto, and, you know, figuring out what works for them. And it's really fun to be able to mix it all up. You know, like having a clinic full time can be boring, honestly. Like, just to tell people not to eat processed food and prioritize meat and vegetables like every single day, 40 hours a day, you know, 40 hours a week. That's a lot of talking. And you know, I feel really grateful that I was able to do something that has an impact on a totally different scale. Yeah.
Well, I just finished reading it, and I feel like we should do some disclosures. Like, Laura, myself, and Diana all subscribe to the same nutritional belief, and perhaps some people listening to this podcast don't, and that's okay. One thing I will say in credit of you and Rob is that, and this goes back to why it took so long to write the book, because it does read to me as though you have explored all of the angles, that you really did try to lobotomize away your confirmation biases. It read that way to me. I'll say that as somebody who fully loves eating animals for all the reasons. It was actually a beautiful book. And when you talk about sort of how you delivered the message, nutrition first, then environmental, then ethical, it was honestly, the word beautiful keeps coming up, especially when we get around to the ethical piece. And it's like, right. So when we wrap this all up in an ethical bow, we have to consider all of the ethics, not just the ethics, not just how sad it makes us that, you know, cows with their big brown eyes are being slaughtered. But what about the ethics of, like, there was such an interesting, this is the environmental piece, but how much water, for example, is being used to water the almond fields in California. But meanwhile, the workers in those fields have no water to drink, right? Like what about that? And I always go back to, and I get into these sort of conversations with plant-based folks. It's like, what about the ethics of the human animal? What about ethically loving the human animal? Like, we're animals too. And so the ethics part really brought it back to, we are in nature. Nature's not just a place to visit, we're part of it, right? Which I thought was just beautiful. So I just want to congratulate you on the book, and thank you for writing it. It was just wonderful to read.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I think a good place to start, we want to talk about a lot of things with you, but I think we'll start with maybe the book stuff, because that's kind of where we left off. So, you know, I still hear this from my clients all the time in my practice. I think that people are getting the sense that, okay, the fat thing that was misguided, fat maybe isn't so bad for us anymore. And people are maybe this may be just my clients, but they're starting to wrap their mind around maybe cholesterol isn't that bad, but red meat causing colon cancer, that one's not going away.
Yes.
That one's not going away. Can you speak to that a little bit? I know there's a lot in the book about it, but can you kind of give us sort of the 30,000 foot view about this colon cancer message it keeps permeating?
Yeah. You know, meat has really replaced fat as the dietary villain, and it's, meat is so much worse than fat ever could have been, because it also comes from a big, beautiful animal and is bad for the environment. And even though those things aren't mentioned specifically in the colon cancer argument, they're definitely in the back of your head, right? Like, well, of course, and it's bad for all these other reasons. So like, it just gives you an extra reason to believe the next news story. But when you look at nutritional research, it's highly flawed. And that's because it's just really difficult. Cancer takes a long time to develop in people. And to isolate one specific food and blame that specific food for, you know, the rise in colon cancer, it's actually impossible to do that. And especially flawed is nutrition research. And so they're relying on self-reported data, which has been proven that, you know, people lie. They'll tell you what you what they think is the healthiest diet, that's what they're going to report, right? And so if we hear that eating red meat is bad, they're going to minimize the red meat. They're going to forget that they smoke and drink. They're going to, forget that they, with that burger, they had a large fry, a 72-ounce soda, and a deep fried apple pie with it, right? They're just going to remember that they had, 4 burgers in the last month. And report that, right? And they're also, so epidemiology can be helpful in some cases, like for smoking cigarettes. We see that, people who smoke cigarettes versus, the same general population that doesn't smoke cigarettes, a 15 time to 30 time increase in all cancers. So that's pretty significant. Mm-hmm. When we talk about colon cancer and red meat, we're not even seeing twice the risk if you were to eat 5 slices of bacon every single day for the entire rest of your life. So when they're saying it's a 20% increase, we have to look at, well, what does that number really mean? Because that's what the media is reporting, right? So if you were to look at the number increase with smoking, it would be, a 30,000 increase, right? So that's 30 times the amount. With colon cancer, your average risk, out in the wild of humans is 5%. Mm-hmm. What they found was people with the self-reported data, so we don't even know if this is true. Right. When they ate, it was like 80 grams, so about 5 slices of bacon every single day, their risk went from 5% to 6%.
Which is an 18% increase.
Which is an 18% or 20, whatever increase. Yeah, right?
Yes.
You can't even, unless something is even double or triple the risk, it's not even statistically significant. And so we just have to really put these things in context and question everything, which is really what we tried to do in the book, is question everything. Where is this coming from? So there really are very few randomized controlled trials looking at meat versus less meat and health outcomes. And what they've found in these trials is, kids do better behaviorally, academically, and physically when they get more meat in their diet compared to, kids that just get extra calories or extra milk in their diet, for example. Yeah. So we don't see any evidence of actually any health benefits of removing meat from an already healthy diet. There are no studies that actually look at that, and certainly not when it comes to cancer.
So I'm curious, because I'm sure you guys have addressed this, but I attended so CrossFit has this certification course for doctors. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to bring the medical community in, and they are bringing in speakers during these conferences. They've had Dr. Robert Lustig. It's all about kind of whole food, low carb. And Greg Glassman, who was the CEO of CrossFit at the time, no longer, was a big believer that if you had to rely on carbohydrates as a CrossFitter, you weren't fit anymore, mm-hmm. right? He went from advocating the zone to something totally different. Mm-hmm. And there was, so I attended one of these little conferences, and one of the speakers, and I'm going to draw a blank on his name. He's a British dude from, I think he was out of Oxford, but he spent a lot of time talking about just how political the whole research game is, mm-hmm. and the pressure on what you have to say to actually get published. Because if your findings and your opinion at the result is not going to essentially articulate the outcome, whoever it was that sponsored that research study, mm-hmm. you just might not get published. And as a researcher, and in his world, the academic world, that's what it's all about. So could you speak to a little bit, because I can't help but there's a different bias. There's a huge bias, I don't know if it's political, corporate, probably all of these things, as far as who's funding this research and who's figuring out how to actually slice and dice the outcomes so that it actually mm-hmm. suits their story.
Right. I mean, if the olive oil industry does a study on, or actually even, here we go. The canola oil industry did a study on Mediterranean diets with canola oil versus standard American diet.
Oh.
And it turns out the canola oil diet wins. It was like the canola oil diet was a whole foods, more balanced diet that wasn't processed food. So it wasn't like, two exact diets. One had olive and one had canola. It was a completely different diet that happened to have canola versus a totally shitty diet, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the media will report that as the canola oil diet wins.
Right.
Same thing with even the Mediterranean style diet. I mean, there's corporate biases certainly with who's funding the study. And just because a company funds a study doesn't necessarily mean that the methodology is bad or that the study should be thrown out, but it's definitely something you want to be paying attention to when you're looking at the findings, and definitely scrutinize any other conflicts of interest that the researchers had, and look at the methodology of the study very carefully. But we also have other biases like the Mediterranean diet, right? There is no Mediterranean diet. There's what they eat in Spain is very, very different than what they eat in Southern
Albania.
Italy. Tons of pork in Spain, tons of fish in Greece. I mean, and to say that, we should be eating a Mediterranean diet is just crazy. Or that there even is one hunter-gatherer diet. We know that the Catawbans and the Maasai and the Inuit all had dramatically different macronutrient intakes, ranging from higher carb to very low or no carb. And what we generally see is once ultra processed foods enter the picture, all the wheels fall off. Yeah. And that all these cultures have all had animal source foods as part of them. Not one has not. Even if they claimed to be vegetarian, they were eating so many insects and other contraband that was like hiding in the grains and everything. And so we have to admit what we don't know and what we do know, and just kind of humble ourselves a little bit when it comes to research findings.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to a lot of coaches listening who I feel like a lot of health coaches are getting into down these, I'm not going to say rabbit hole because that's an overused phrase on podcasts. I'm going to say badger hole. Let's go with badger hole. So they're going down these research badger holes, and we in our own echo chambers love diving into research. But I get really annoyed on behalf of the health consumer, for whom I consider myself an advocate. And I think we're all advocates because we're you're a dietitian, we're health coaches. And the way this stuff is reported, sort of extracted and kind of really extrapolated and very simplified and then put into the media, is the part that really irritates me. And there was one illustration you made in the book where it was like talking about, again, going back to the cancer thing. So processed meats, class 1 carcinogen. And the way that they categorize these carcinogens is really kind of just like, there's almost nothing to it, right? And you use the analogy like, car accidents and banana peel accidents could be in the same category as being highly accident causing. Banana peels can cause as many accidents as car accidents, put them in the same category, whatever, something along those lines, how foolish and silly it is, right?
Right.
I on behalf of the health consumer, like as coaches working with health consumers, these are our clients. What do you think is, what is sort of what's our position? What position can we take when we're trying to, encourage our clients to maybe come into their own subjective experience, maybe spend less time in the media? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely, that's a good question. I think we need to understand that there isn't one perfect diet for humans. Right. Most people who are metabolically broken definitely seem to, just from my years of coaching, thrive on a lower carb diet. When you jack up the protein a little bit, get rid of the processed foods. But that doesn't mean that some people might do fine on a higher carb diet. Everyone just has a different set of genetic predispositions that make them more or less carb tolerant, more or less fat tolerant. I happen to be incredibly sensitive to both carbs and fat. So I have to eat a really high protein diet. Robb can eat a much higher fat diet than I can, and he does okay. And you know, I think in the future there's going to be a lot more genetic testing that's going to go into like your personalized diet. We're going to be able to test the genome of people and their biome and find out, okay, you know, pasta's bad for you, but you can do rice. I mean, I've tested my blood sugar against potatoes, and I'm fine on potatoes, but my blood sugar spikes if I eat polenta or rice. And so the more I learn about nutrition, the less confident I am that there's, you know, one size fits all for everybody. But I think there is a general template that works well. And I think it's, you know, what we're talking about here, generally a whole foods diet. If someone is struggling with their weight and carb tolerance, lower carb is a great thing. And that there's a lot of people out there trying to make money on these magic, you know, it's easier to like eat a goji berry than it is to stay away from ice cream. Right. And so there's a lot of people trying to sell, you know, this magic, you know, fish oil cure, snake oil cure, whatever it is. And, you know, not one thing works for everybody. And also a diet's not going to work if someone's not going to stick to it. Right. So what is manageable for your client? And, you know, is baby steps maybe more appropriate for some people than other people? You know, if you want everyone to go on a 30-day keto or, you know, Whole30 type challenge or whatever your philosophy is, do they have to do that tomorrow? Or do some people need to, you know, for me, I had to go gluten-free, and then, you know, it was baby steps over at like a 10-year period before I really got to where I was going. And, you know, you have to figure out, are they a questioner, or are they an obliger, you know, reading some of Gretchen Rubin's work and really trying to figure out what motivates people. There's just so much that goes into being a successful coach that's way beyond like your personal diet philosophy and what you think works for people.
Absolutely.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And we try to drive home the message that, you know, if you call yourself a health coach, you have to lead with that coach persona first, right? That we're not here to tell people what to do. We're not here to put people on a diet. Health coaches, you are not in place to treat, diagnose, or prescribe anything. That is not what we do, unless, of course, you're Diana and you're a dietitian and a coach. That's a different story. And that's what you wanted, right? You wanted to treat IBS or celiac or what have you. And we have a lot of people that want to be health coaches that want to help folks. Maybe they have a similar background. But we need to focus and really lean into the skills and the type of relationship that a coaching relationship is with these clients. Because I don't know about you, but I've been put on diets before. And I was okay while I was on the diet. But like, if it feels like a diet, I'm looking at the end game, right? Rather than making it a lifestyle, and rather than really learning how to change behavior and change habits. And that's really what coaches need to focus on. So, you know, coaches that are listening, let's say you're like Diana and you had celiac disease or IBS. We have a lot of people that come here with some sort of condition and that they want to work with folks with that condition. Fantastic. But you're not a clinical practitioner, but you do know what it takes to actually support that person through the journey. You can share your story. You can provide resources along the way. You can help answer questions about the diet that worked for you, or that maybe they've been handed, or, hey, I really don't like this, but I like that. And what's that going to do? Like, you can answer all of those questions.
Yeah, it's so tricky because people will hear all the things they can't eat, and they're so focused on what, I mean, that's what happened for me when I was first celiac, and I just went to a dietitian dietitians don't always make the best coaches. And I'm actually not that great of a coach. Like, if someone really needs a lot of motivation, I'm not a great match for them, because I just have like all this other stuff going on. And I'm like, I can tell you what to eat, but you know, but I think helping someone who really needs that extra push, and, you know, I don't like zucchini, or I don't, you know, maybe they don't know how to cook it. You know, there's so many other things that I think are so important that coaches can help even dietitians with, as far as, so I was going to say, I was so overly focused on, oh my God, I'll never eat pizza again. I'll never eat pretzels again. I was, and instead, if you just focus on what you can eat and realize that it's this many different things, you just need to learn how to cook better and get an Instant Pot and, just totally spin it on its head into, like I'm an artist. And so it's just a new palette of constraints that I have.
Yeah.
Right. So like, instead of being able to just grab that box of, rice-a-roni, I have to figure out how to do this with cauliflower and garlic and cilantro or, anyway, I'm just kind of going off on that.
No, but you're absolutely right? That's the role of what a coach can help do, is help that client think through how, what does my life look like now?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And help that client almost pre-experience that, look forward to that, catalog the things they want to now learn, treat it as more of an adventure. This is like a whole new world now. There's so much in the beginning that you don't even know you don't know.
Right.
Right. And and sometimes, like you, I feel like the more I know about nutrition, the more I realize how much I don't know.
Right.
Sorry, Erin.
But I mean, and this is about empowering our clients to self-experiment, which is what you did when you were in school and you did Robb's diet, try for 30 days, see how you look, feel, and perform. And you're like, dang, this is great. But what I do sometimes with my clients when they start getting, and I can be a little bit, you might be able to relate to this, Diana, but I'm a good coach, but I'm not a super nurturing, like they're coddling type coach. So if they start saying, I really miss my old way of eating, this food is so boring, I'll say, well, tell me about the exciting foods that you are missing. And they'll say, oh, like toast, shredded wheat. I'm like, okay. And then as they're kind of listing off these incredibly boring foods, they're having the realization that they've actually got a whole palette, to use your artist analogy, of beautiful foods in front of them. And that's really, we're not here to shame or cajole or joke with our clients. We're honestly here to get them to develop their self-efficacy and realize that there's lots of beautiful potential in gorgeous human food.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to go ahead, Erin.
Well, I wanted to talk about the fake meat business a little bit. I know it's a bit of a leap, but the reason I wanted to bring it up is because since we're talking about clients and how they report and what they should be eating and what they want to be eating, they feel like they should be, and therefore they feel like they want to eat fake meat for all the reasons that we know, ethical, moral, whatever, environmental. And I know this is a huge question to ask, but if you were gonna list the top 3 or 5 things that are wrong with fake meat, what would those be? Or maybe we should also, if we're going to be truly neutral about this, is there anything right about fake meat?
I never thought about that. Is there anything right about fake meat? I mean, I suppose if someone's having if they're ethically or religiously, just completely opposed to eating animals, and they're incredibly protein deficient, and they don't have the luxury of eating 700 calories worth of beans and rice to get 300 grams of protein, and they're unwilling to cook it, I could see myself potentially saying, well, then you gotta eat some Beyond Burger, right? I mean, because the thing is the only unprocessed, the least processed way to get 30 grams of protein is at least 4 times the calories of eating a piece of fish, or twice as many calories as a piece of steak, right? So in a 3.5 ounce piece of steak, is it 3.5 or 4 ounces? I think it was 4 ounces. You get 30 grams of protein. You would have to eat 400 calories worth of lentils, and that's not even complete protein. Or if you want a complete protein, beans and rice, 730 calories worth of beans and rice to get the same protein. And you're still not getting the macronutrient profile, the vitamins and minerals that you would get from a 200 calorie piece of red meat. And I don't love counting calories, but at some point it is about calories, and, protein is satiating. And so if you're trying to get all of your nutrients for the least amount of calories without having to count them, eat more protein.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the easiest way to do it. A protein is satiating. It's less expensive than the ultra processed stuff. And it can be better for the environment depending on how it's raised. But I would even argue, even typical beef that's not grass-fed has been overly vilified as environmentally damaging. And I'm not endorsing feedlots. And I want to be careful about that. People often will take my nuanced statements out of context and say, oh, well, she's just for the beef industry. And that's not true. But cattle, even in a feedlot situation, they're not on feedlots their entire lives. Right. They're only on feedlots for the last 3, 4, maybe 5 months, usually about 3 months of their lives. And so the first part of their lives, they're grazing, just like all other cattle are grazing. And over their entire course of their life, only about 10% of their overall diet is coming from grain. Most of it is coming from grass or from things like corn husks from the ethanol industry that would sit in a pile, decompose, and emit greenhouse gases if we didn't feed it to a cow and upcycle it into protein. And so, the typical beef is overly dramatized as being, bad with water, bad with feed, bad with methane. And I fully think that regenerative meat is better on all those levels, on an animal welfare level, but it's not the main way beef is produced. Mm-hmm. It's very expensive and inaccessible to a lot of people. And I still think that when we're looking at people who just need to fix their diet, meat is nutrient dense, period. Yeah. Even if it's finished on a feedlot, it is nutrient dense. And there's actually very little difference in nutrients between grass finished beef and feedlot finished beef. And so when we're talking to people who are overeating calories, not getting enough nutrients, and need to be cutting down on their calories to feel more full so that they're not having to count everything, increasing their protein is one of the easiest things you can do in order to help them naturally feel more full and just be healthier metabolically in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And I thank you for putting that out there too, because I think that's one of the big criticisms the paleo diet gets is how expensive it is, because everything's got to be grass-fed and organic and pasture raised. And look, in a perfect world, if you can afford that, fantastic. I used to tell clients that, look, if you can't afford that, then rather, first of all, keep the grass-fed or organic stuff, the lower priced cuts of meat, right? Especially the fattier ones. Mm-hmm. And then if you just need a nice, like leaner steak and there isn't as much fat around it, because my understanding was a lot of what toxins may be there, if the feed that the animals are eating has toxins in it, like whatever pesticides or whatever, or there's antibiotics, you're going to find it in the fat, not in the muscle tissue.
The differences between feedlot finished beef and grass finished beef is in the fats for sure. I wasn't able to find a whole lot of evidence though that there's a significant difference with omegas or with glyphosate or with much of anything in a significant way. Like if you were to, let's say, eat beef, let's say 4 times a week, and you kept the rest of your diet the same and just switched to grass-fed versus grass finished versus feedlot finished, I don't think as a dietitian there would be any significant difference in your health at all. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't support grass-fed producers if you have access to that and can support them. I think we definitely should. But as a health practitioner, I could never say to somebody, only eat organic vegetables or don't eat vegetables. Right. And I think a lot of people are going around saying only eat grass-finished beef or don't eat meat. Right. And I think that's actually a very unethical position to have.
Mm-hmm. Is it true? Because I thought I did hear that grass-fed beef is higher in omega-3s and lower in omega-6. Mm-hmm. Is there any significant? difference?
largest study that looked at that had almost 800 samples and looked at, you know, the omegas. And what they found was a wide variety. So anywhere from a 1-to-1 to a 20-to-1 omega-6 to 3 ratio in grass-fed beef across the board of beef that's marketed as grass-fed. Some of the studies have found twice the omega-3s. But we have to also look at, is beef a good source of omega-3s to begin with? And it's not.
Right.
So,
Right.
so if you were to, you know, look at this as a dollar's worth of fat, the omegas in beef, in a steak is like 1 penny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we have grass-fed beef over here with 2 pennies worth of omega-3s, that is twice as much,
Right.
but it's still, you would still need to eat 8 pounds of grass-fed beef to get the same omega-3s you could get in a 3-ounce piece of salmon. And so if people are really concerned about their omega ratio, they have to look at their overall diet, eat less omega-6s in general, which is, you know, grain-based products and vegetable oils and things like that, and eat more things that have omega-3s, which are leafy vegetables and fatty fish. So beef is not going to make any difference at all in your life, whether in your omega status, you know, whether or not you're eating grass-fed or typical beef. In fact, chicken is way higher in omega-6. I mean, people don't realize, and pork too, than feedlot finished beef.
Is that a natural thing about the animal? Or, oh, I'm sorry, Erin. Yeah, I was going to ask you to clarify that. Is that kind of how they're raised and what they are fed, or is that just natural?
Yeah, so it's their digestive system, because they're monogastric animals. What they, and like humans, they have one stomach. What they eat sort of gets directly transcoded into your bodily makeup, where ruminant animals, they're not actually directly digesting their food. They have bacteria in their rumen that are basically taking the inputs and then feeding the cow basically a ketogenic diet, fatty acids. And so what ends up in their steaks and fat and milk isn't directly as impacted by what they're eating as a monogastric animal. We do see grass-fed milk being milk from grass-fed cattle is significantly better than typical beef, and because dairy animals, it's a whole different story too than cattle raised for beef. So dairy cattle don't tend to be on pasture as much as beef cattle. Eggs from pasture chickens, dramatically different, totally worth double or triple the price, because what you're getting in a pasture raised egg is so much more valuable than in a typical egg. So it just depends on, you know, wild salmon, totally so much better for you than farm raised salmon, and dramatically different as far as ecological footprint and even humane treatment. But just when we're talking about beef, it's just not as much as some of those other meats.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that.
That was awesome clarification. Thank you very much. I'd like to get a bit more clarification, if you wouldn't mind, on, like, let's just go with eggs, for example. So free range, free run, organic, fed, nest laid, cage free.
Yeah.
Pastured is a chicken. Pastured is a chicken that's out in the pasture eating grubs and bugs and whatever
Mostly.
else. Okay. And then what are these other? So is everything else besides pasture kind of garbage?
No, because you can still get choline. There's still important nutrients that you get from eggs that, you know, if you're in a hospital and your choice is eggs or pancakes, get the eggs, right? I mean, even if they're industrially raised chickens that produced eggs, it's still a better choice than a bagel or cornflakes, right? But my recommendation would be to, you know, if you have access to a local farmer's market or somebody who's raising chickens outdoors, that's going to be best, because it's going to travel less. They'll be fresher. Eggs last forever in the fridge when you get them fresh. And you know, it's very rare that I only know a handful of people that actually don't give their chickens grain. Almost everybody does, and that's just, I mean, birds eat seeds, and so that's when chickens aren't laying and I don't have access to local fresh, seasonal eggs, because chickens, it's all based on the light, right? So in the winter in New England, chickens just in a blizzard are not laying eggs because they don't want to be reproducing at that time. I'll get the Vital Pastures. Is it Vital? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No. Yes. Vital Pastures, eggs. And, they're great. So I think it's just, what do you have access to? What can you afford? I mean, they're definitely more expensive. But I do think, if you're just weighing your options, should I get the grass-fed milk over typical milk? Should I get the pasture-raised eggs over the battery cage chickens? Or should I get, the grass-finished regenerative beef over the typical beef? I would go for the eggs and dairy as pastured over the steaks.
Yeah. And then I have a follow-up question, actually, because I have a client who, I had a client who was she was very empathetic towards chickens. She had a high level of chicken empathy. And she wanted to eat, it's a long story, she wanted to eat eggs. And she said she'll only eat eggs that are labeled organic because the organic label itself indicates some kind of chicken handling technique that she's more comfortable with. Is that true to your knowledge?
Well, what's really interesting is there are humane handling laws around large animals, so around cattle and sheep and pigs, not so for poultry or seafood. So fish and chicken basically can be slaughtered however the people want, and there are no humane handling laws against that, scolding them live or whatever.
Oh goodness.
And so ethically, and if you think about how many chickens you would need, how many chicken lives you would need to give up in order to get the same amount of meat you can get off one cow, which is almost 500 pounds. I mean, how many chickens would you need to kill to get 500 pounds of meat? I just, for so many reasons. And beef is 30% more nutrient dense than chicken, and doesn't have the omega-6s that chicken has and all those things. So I'm a big proponent of beef over chicken or pork, actually, if you only have access to typical. As far as the organic label with eggs, there are some humane handling rules, I think, as far as chicken lives with the organic standards. And I'd have to brush up on that. I'm on the board of Animal Welfare Approved, which is another a very much more intense level of animal welfare certification. And so I'm not recalling all, but we actually do have a resource I'm realizing that I hadn't mentioned that. So Rob and I created a course called Meat Curious.
Oh.
And it's for people who are uncomfortable about meat, who, they're concerned. Maybe they read the book, but, need a little more explanation. So Rob and I did a 10-module course called Meat Curious. It's okay to eat meat, where we go through nutrition, environment, and ethics. And then as part of that, we also have a sourcing guide and a handling guide too. Like, how do you thaw meat? How do you, what are the right temperatures? Because a lot of people, when I was running our farm stand, they had a whole frozen chicken. Like, that's how a lot of farms will sell chicken, right? They don't butcher it up into boneless, skinless, fresh, floppy breasts. It's just a whole chicken, often frozen. What the hell are you going to do with that? Like a lot of people are just like, So we walk people through how to thaw it, where to buy it, what labels to look for. And we do have a full description of what all of those labels mean in that guide. So I don't know exactly when it's coming out, but it'll be available for sure when we release the film, which will probably be sometime in October, November. And so folks can sign up for the newsletter or go sacredcow.info and just poke around. And if it's not up there yet, sign up for the newsletter and it'll be out soon.
Cool.
So through the writing of the book, and I would imagine through the filming of the movies, you have come across a lot of really great local family-run farms and resources that people can tap into because, look, I just moved from Chicagoland area to St. Augustine, Florida, and I was spoiled rotten. I realize now in the suburbs of Chicago, I have a Whole Foods here. I've got a fresh market here. Like seriously, any natural food market is no more than 10 minutes from my house. It's easy for me to access this stuff. I'm now in St. Augustine, Florida, in kind of an up and coming new area. Everything's like a half hour away. So I'm like, I'm going to have to really start to mail order everything. I'm sure I could probably find a local farm. I haven't gotten that far yet. But other than like a butcher box or some of the ones that I see promoted on social media, what are some of these organizations, maybe some of these farms that are a great resource, that are reasonably priced, that you've seen do a great job as far as animal welfare and sustainability that people should look into?
Oh, that's a good question. So eatwild.com is a great resource people can go to connect to a local farm. And I believe all the farms on that website are pasture based, like you have to be pasture based. And and even for the farm, Clark Farm, where I was, the sheep, we give them a little bit of grain when we're trying to, bring them out to a field. Like they need to follow somebody because there's like traffic and, school children over there and everything. And we had to disclose that we gave them this much grain, but we had, they need a reason to follow you. And if they like grain and you're shaking a bucket of grain, they will follow you and not run into the street. And so we actually wrote that too. And so I think eatwild.com is a great resource. Localharvest.org is another website resource where you can find local farms. Blue Nest Beef is another company. They actually sponsor my podcast, and they were sponsors of the film, so I should disclose that. But that's an interesting organization because they work with the Audubon Society, which is a very famous bird organization. But the Audubon Society has realized that you can't just have pastures empty, that you actually need grazing animals in order to keep grasslands healthy, and keeping grasslands healthy is the number one way that we can save birds. And so they're partnering with cattle ranchers in order to keep grasslands healthy. You have to have grazing animals on grasslands or else they're going to fall apart. And so I really like them a lot. There's a lot of sponsors of my film, so it's hard for me to be like, oh, well,
right.
This organization, that organization. So find a farm that's close to you. And if not, there are really good organizations that are, selling beef. Another book that I wrote called The Homegrown Paleo Cookbook, which is it's a seasonal cookbook, but also it's a homesteading guide, but also teaches you what to look for when you go to a farm. So why do we want rotational grazing and not continuous grazing? And what's the difference there? And what to look for when you actually go to a farm? What kind of questions do you want to ask your farmer? If you see the cattle or any animal standing around in a fixed pen without being moved frequently, where there's, all the grass is like super short or even, not grass anymore, but like patchy dirt, that's not a good sign. And so what you want is constantly moving animals on fresh pasture all the time, because that's healthiest for the animals, that's healthiest for the soil. But still continuous grazing is, even though it's not as good as rotational grazing, it's still better than any kind of plowing that could be going on to make corn or wheat, right? Like beef is healthier than bread. So it's not like black and white. There's definitely, I know black and white is easy and it sells better, and complicated stories are not as easy to digest by people, but there's just a lot of, there's a scale of, good, better, and best practices.
There's so much to be learned. And I encourage everybody to pick up the book, because there's so much to be learned. I had no idea, and I don't know why I didn't know this, because if you look at soil and you can see that it's black, and maybe that should have been a cue that there's that much carbon in soil. And then when we start tilling it and plowing it, we're releasing it, right? Like just wild stuff that you don't think about. And I have so many questions about rotational grazing. I'm not gonna even go down that path because I could probably talk your ear off about rotational grazing for a long time.
We have some great, you know, you guys haven't seen the film yet, but Nick Offerman, who's our narrator of the film, does a really good job of explaining an animation that we have about rotational grazing in the film. So why you want to be doing it like that. And he's a huge advocate of the message. You know, he's very good friends with lots of farmers and one of the farmers in the film. And so it's an easy concept to see in a graphic than it's much harder to explain to someone who might just be in their car listening to this.
So what were the one or two things that you really learned going through this process? You know, were there some things that you learned that you're like, you know what?
I never want to make a film again. That's the number one thing I learned, actually. No, I'm just joking. Fundraising is really hard. You know, asking people for money, especially for a project that's your own, is really a hard thing to do, because you're asking people to have a lot of faith in you, and it's not an easy thing for me to do. I don't even post selfies. So like asking people to support me financially on a dream that I have to deliver on was something that was just really scary for me. And there was a couple of points in the film where it looked like it might not move forward. And I was, throwing up, thinking of taking people's money and then not actually being able to deliver on that. And so there was just a lot of pressure that I had on myself to make sure that even if the whole film might not happen, I was delivering something, because I had all of these people that were counting on me to do that. So it was definitely a very almost manic depressive project, because you know, it looked like we were going to get money from this one organization. Oh, COVID happens and they pulled out. Like it's just so many ups and downs. And it was quite exhausting to, you know, over the course of 2019, I traveled just about every other week for a full week. So I would be home for a week, on for a week, home for a week. And as the producer and director, I am not only responsible for, you know, asking the questions and being the boss of the camera guys and everything, but the producer's job is to be like the mom, right? So like I'm booking the flights, I'm booking the Airbnb, I'm figuring out which camera guys are free to bring with us on the trip. I'm in charge if the flight gets canceled, which happens. Our flight to Mexico got delayed, and then our baggage came a day later. And it was just like, it's just nonstop headaches that you have to troubleshoot and figure out. Okay, we were in England and filming with James Rebanks, the shepherd farmer, pouring rain. The festival we were going to shoot at that showed community, which was the whole purpose of our shoot there, was canceled because it was too muddy and the sheep would have torn up the fields. So now we have to talk about something totally different with James, because it's not about farming communities. It's about, well, you know, and so we had to change everything. We lost shoot days. It's England. So it's like, when am I going to get back there again? You know, and then I have a family at home, and I had, you know, stuff going on with them. And so it was just it was a lot. It took a lot out of me. It like really, it just wore me down. And I have so much respect for filmmakers now. Like there's just no filmmaker that I wouldn't kiss their feet right now, because I just know how hard it is to go through the process to raise the money, to not get paid. I mean, there's no way I will make even minimum wage for all the energy that I put into this project. And not to be like, woe is me or anything, but I didn't even know any of that going into this. I just thought, well, this needs to happen because there's all these plant-based films out there that are really, you know, swaying people. And I'm getting all these sick teenage girls coming into my practice who don't have their period and they're losing their hair. And that's because they watched this stupid film in high school in biology class, and somebody needs to do a counterpoint. So at least there can be some dialogue. So that's why I did the film. Cause the book was already in the works, but I was like, how many people are going to read this book?
Right.
Compared to, if I were to make a film, with someone like, we're so happy to have Nick Offerman on there because young people know who he is and they're much more likely to watch the film because he's in it. The reason I made it was because I wanted young people to have just a completely different perspective in there. Yeah. And I don't think people also appreciate how much crap, I get from, people saying that I'm corporate sponsored to, I'm just doing this for the money to,
oh my gosh,
just all the criticisms I get. And I just, figuring out who to shoot with and turning it into a story and getting the animators and getting the right team of editors. It's unbelievably difficult to pull it off. Yeah. And that's why I think so many film projects fail, or why people decide to just go sell popcorn instead of become a filmmaker or whatever they're going to do. And I totally respect it.
But you're so right. I mean, there are so many sort of plant-based, plant-biased films that are full of, I hate to say it, it's propaganda. So much of what they shovel to be truthful or it's research is not true. We just talked about how nuanced and just how some of the research is actually framed. And like the last one was Game Changers, right? And just how those of us that, like, I remember watching it being like, who's fooled by any of this stuff? Clearly tons of people. I mean, because I saw it all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember when I had learned about your movie coming out thinking, thank God, because we need the other side of the story. Magic Pill came out, so that was great. I can't wait for yours to come out. So I can't thank you enough for taking up that gauntlet and running with it, because you're right. This younger generation that's going to need to know this stuff, they're not going to read a book. I'll read a book, Erin will read a book.
I just want to mention too, because I know you said like, this isn't a Mark Sisson podcast, and so don't feel like, but Mark was huge in helping me with the film. And I just do have to pay some credit to him. So not only did he help financially, but he inspired a lot of other people to help financially too. He was matching donations from other people.
Oh, awesome.
And calling me a lot with thoughts on how to make the film better. And, giving me advice and things like that. Just randomly like texting me. And so, this is something that he truly is like beyond passionate about. And, I think between him and Rob and Chris Kresser and all of the other leaders in this movement, having their support and advice and encouragement to move forward with this has been huge. Melissa Hartwig has been huge in her support for the book, like completely unexpectedly too, because, and I'm also a Whole30 coach on top of, everything, but, Whole30 tries to be vegetarian and vegan friendly, or at least, embracing as many people as they can. But she does believe that animal protein is superior, and that the message of the book was really important, and, came out very publicly in support of the book, which was really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mark has the best book blurb, I think. I highly recommend Sacred Cow for anyone who eats. This is so good. But I think, just to kind of sum up, like, whatever about your own our own biases, we have to have all opinions shared, so that people who are out there making their own decisions about food at least have access to a well-rounded variety of information. And so I'm very grateful that you put yourself through that to make the movie for us all. And I'd love to know what's next after Sacred Cow, the book, the movie. I'm sure you're going to take a little bit of maybe a rest. Yeah. But I know people always say, people have said this about writing books, I'm never writing a book again. And then they do. I'm never making a movie again. And then they do. Like, what do you think? Like, what might be next for you after this?
Well, I'm taking patients again in my clinic, which is really rewarding because I had to stop for a while. It was just too hard to be with my crazy travel schedule. Like I wasn't being a very good practitioner because I just couldn't follow up with people the way I wanted to. And it's just really hard to go from filmmaking to marketing to practitioner back to filmmaking again. It's just a switching of a lot of hats. And so I have a clinic in Concord, Massachusetts, where I see people in person or distance. And that's just something I love to do. And it's just, as you know, very rewarding to change people's lives through food. And so I've been just kind of chilling out and doing that a lot more. I was invited to about 15 different countries initially to screen the film. And now, of course, I can't do that. So I'm hoping that a lot of these conferences, I'll be doing a lot of virtual conferences, but I'm hoping that some of them also then happen maybe next, whenever travel opens up again. I'm really excited about some of the work. I've been doing a little work with Heifer International. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that organization, but it's where you can like gift a water buffalo to a family in Vietnam, for example. So it's like a Christmas present that you can get in, I do it every year for my dad, despite his frustration with me when I do it, but I'll get like a flock of bees for a family somewhere, in his name. Makes him mad. So I really like the work they're doing, and I'm hoping to do a lot more, consulting and travel and just get this out there. I do have a grant going for what they call an impact campaign. So trying to get this film beyond the commercial market. So the film is going to be out on major streaming platforms probably in the winter of this year. So December, January or so, probably more like January. But then getting it into schools, getting it into conferences, getting it into the hands of people at universities, that's kind of stuff above and beyond what a typical distributor would, they're just not going to make a lot of money doing that. But I do have a campaign that I'm working on that people have been donating to, called an impact campaign, where people are paying me to do that extra marketing to, maybe not for the money, but for just that extra push, getting it screened at universities and things and conferences. So that for the next little while, I'm really, really interested in nutrient density and satiety. So that might be an avenue that I focus on in the future. I'm also really interested in food equity. I actually just this morning did an amazing interview with a woman who's a doctor in India trying to work on public health there. There's a lot of religious bias in nutrition policy that's restricting animal products to school children, so that they can't even get eggs in school. A lot of kids go to school just for the meal, like because they're so hungry. And so that's something that I'm super, super passionate about. And I'd love to find a way to do more work like that. So
let us know if you start making headway there. I know we all feel very strongly about that too. Food equity is super important because, people talk about how, tell us, a family that's trying to live on, $20,000 a year that they should be eating paleo and whatever. And I'm like, you're kind of losing the forest for the trees there. But the same thing can be held true for people trying to advocate for a vegan or vegetarian diet for those same people. And just how unfair that is.
It's quite unfair. I write about that in the book, actually. And the last several podcasts have all been about why telling people who don't have the privilege to push nutrient-dense food away to restrict meat is actually unethical. And so I actually have huge issues even with the Meatless Mondays program because most of the kids in the New York City public school system are low income, and there's never been any evidence that pulling meat away from children will do any good. And so, programs that help get nutrient dense food into the hands of people that have traditionally been, forgotten when it comes to nutrient dense food, women and minorities. Women have been restricted meat our whole, it's women got the meat last. And so and it's still in our culture today. If I go out to dinner and order a steak and I'm sitting with a guy that orders a salad, they'll bring me the salad, right? Yeah. Women just, steak is barbaric and bloody and manly and just not something that that is feminine or what a healthy woman should be eating. So all those things I think are very important.
Mm-hmm. I know I see that in my practice. I think Erin does too, because we both focus predominantly on women, and I hear from, I just don't like meat. I just don't like but really when I get to the root of why, I think it's a lot of it is societal, and the way it's viewed, and that red meat is somehow a masculine food, or that red meat somehow makes you fat. And I'm like, what? No. It's all the other crap, So I don't know what it's going to take, because clearly, and look, I am not anti-vegetable. I love vegetable. I had a salad for lunch, so it's not about whether you're like vegan or all of this. These are all whole foods, right? But somehow the advocacy group for a plant-only diet has gotten their claws in somewhere. Somebody, or probably multiple people pretty high up, that are pushing this agenda. And I'm wondering what it's going to take to have probably something similar. Somebody equally high up that gets it, that can help push a different story.
I think it's the satiety, nutrient density, and bioavailability piece that you're talking about. I think that might be the thing that moves the needle
that pushes
on that.
it.
Yeah, maybe. I think if we can get people to believe that or understand that a bit more, that might help. What do you think?
Yeah, I that's why in the book we called it a nutrivore diet. So like if you just take emotion completely out of the mix and look at the evidence of what is the most nutrient dense diet humans can be eating, what you see is a whole foods paleo type diet that's incredibly rich in animal products. So oysters, liver and lots of red meat and fatty fish. And so, if we look at that and then add in some asparagus and spinach and, it was really fun to look at even the most nutrient dense vegetables, like how can you really like pack on those. I've done like nutrient density challenges before where I've tracked all my micronutrients, like how can I get the most B12 and iron and all that stuff. So I agree completely that if you're just to have an argument about nutrients and take emotion out of it, then that's why we started the book with nutrition and then moved into the environment and ethics section.
I love it.
Yeah.
So it is officially out. People can buy it.
Yep.
They can go to, is it sacredcow.com?
Sacredcow.info is the website. And the book's available on all places that books are sold. Finally back in stock. It sold out within like 10 minutes of launching, which really stunk actually. I know it sounds good, but then, it hurts sales, because then if it's not available, people are less likely to click that day and all of that. And then the website has tons of infographics, blog posts, links to the podcast and information on the film. We've got our trailer up there so people can see it and they can listen to Nick Offerman talking and find out how they can opt into. We're going to be doing a free week this fall before it's released on the major streaming platforms. And so everyone can go to sacredcow.info and sign up for the newsletter to find out when that's going to happen and how to opt into that. And so, I'm really excited for that. And I just really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you. And coaches definitely dive into these resources, because we need to understand food so that our clients can understand food.
Yeah. And we hear it. We get these questions in our Facebook group, and I'm sure it's not just our program, where people are like, this is what I think my client really needs, but she's being told this, or, how do I counter argue so many of these things? And you're going to find it here.
Definitely. I mean, right in the beginning of the book, we have all the common questions and what page you can find the answers to, like, does meat cause cancer? Boom, all those things. So
cool. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Diana.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.